My name is Rachel Mercer. I'm 31 years old. And the Tuesday morning I read my mother's text, the one meant for everyone but me, was when I finally understood that some people will only notice what you carry once you set it down. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. I was at my desk at 7:40 in the morning, coffee going cold beside my keyboard, when my phone buzzed with a message from my Aunt Deborah. She hadn't written anything in the body of the text. She had simply forwarded a thread. My mother's name was at the top. The recipients were my brother, my sister, my cousin Janelle, my uncle Pete, Deborah herself, and 4 other family members I recognized. My name was not there. The message read, "Don't tell Rachel about Thanksgiving dinner. We need one holiday without the drama. You know how she gets. Just tell her you have other plans if she asks." I set my phone face down on the desk. I picked up my coffee. I took one sip even though it was cold. Then I turned the phone back over and read it again, slowly, the way you read something when part of you is hoping the words will rearrange themselves into something less clear. They didn't. I opened a new text to my mother. I typed 4 words. "I saw it, Mom." I pressed send. Then I opened my banking application, navigated to the recurring transfers page, and looked at the entry I had set up 47 months earlier. $1,847. Mercer Mortgage. Auto, first of month. I did not respond to the thread. I did not call anyone. I closed the app, put my phone in my desk drawer, and finished the report I had been working on before the message arrived. What none of them knew, what my mother had apparently forgotten entirely, was that the house she was hosting Thanksgiving dinner in was, in practical terms, mine to keep or mine to release. And I had not yet decided which it would be. Let me tell you how we got there, because none of it happened the way you might expect. There was no single blow-up, no dramatic falling out, no moment where I stood in a doorway and announced that things were going to change. What there was, instead, was a slow and ordinary accumulation of years, and a family pattern so well established that no one inside it could see it clearly anymore, including me, for a long time. I grew up in Claremont, a mid-sized city in the inland part of Southern California, in a tan stucco house on a street where every yard had at least one citrus tree. My mother, Donna Mercer, had worked as a dental office manager for 22 years. My father, Gerald, had done finished carpentry until his knees gave out in my sophomore year of high school, after which he did bookkeeping for 2 small contractors and watched a lot of afternoon television. They were not dramatic people. They were not cruel people in the way that word usually gets used. They were people who had developed, over decades, a set of habits around who mattered and who could be counted on to absorb whatever was left over. My brother, Derek, was 3 years older than me. Derek was the one my parents talked about at dinner parties. He had played varsity baseball in high school, had a loud and easy laugh, and had a way of filling a room that my parents found deeply reassuring. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I think they did, in the background way that you love a piece of furniture you've stopped noticing, present, functional, taken for granted in the most literal sense of the phrase. Derek's problems got attention. Derek's successes got celebrations. Derek's opinion at the table carried weight in a way that shifted the conversation. Mine was the voice that got talked over, not out of malice, but out of years of practice. I had learned, somewhere around age 13, to stop competing for air in that room. I became instead the one who handled things. I took the notes when my parents needed to deal with insurance after my father's knee surgery. I researched the options when my mother's car needed replacing. I managed the spreadsheet when Derek's wedding rehearsal dinner needed a venue and a caterer and someone to track the RSVPs. Nobody asked me to do these things. I just did them because they needed doing, and I was the one who noticed. That competence became invisible the same way I had. It was simply expected. I left for college at 18 on an academic scholarship to a state university 2 hours north. I studied accounting, which was not glamorous and which nobody at home found particularly interesting to discuss, but which suited the part of my brain that had always been most comfortable with systems and structures and the clean logic of numbers that either balanced or didn't. I graduated with a 3.91 GPA. I passed the CPA exam on my first attempt, all 4 sections, in the same calendar year. I took a position at a regional audit firm in Pasadena, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, and began the quiet work of building a life that was entirely my own construction. I was good at it. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice and was managing a team of 5. My salary was not extraordinary, but it was steady and it grew, and I had been careful with it from the beginning in a way that my family, had they asked, would have found either admirable or tedious depending on the day. They did not ask. What they did, in the year I turned 27, was call me with a problem. My parents' mortgage had been underwater for 2 years by then. My father's bookkeeping income had dropped when one of his contractors folded, and my mother had taken a pay cut when the dental practice she worked for merged with a larger group and restructured. They were not in foreclosure, not yet, but they were 3 months behind, and the lender had begun sending letters with language that my mother described on the phone as scary. She used that word twice. I remember it because she almost never admitted to being afraid of anything. She expressed fear as frustration, as sharpness, as a quick pivot to someone else's fault. To hear her say scary was unusual. I asked her to send me the statements. She did. I looked at them over a weekend. The balance was $221,400. The monthly payment was $1,847. They were behind by $5,541 plus late fees. I ran the numbers against my savings, my emergency fund, my investment account. I called a friend of mine, a real estate attorney named Marcus Webb, who I had met through a client, and asked him 2 questions. What were the legal implications of making payments on someone else's mortgage, and what documentation would I want in place? He walked me through it on a Saturday afternoon. I took notes. The following Monday, I called my mother back. I told her I would cover the arrears to bring the account current, and I would set up a recurring transfer to cover the monthly payment going forward. I told her I wanted a notarized letter acknowledging the arrangement, drafted by Marcus, which would record the payments as a personal loan to be settled from the estate or from any future sale of the property. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Rachel, you don't have to do that." The way she said it, I understood she was hoping I would say, "No, I want to." So I did. Marcus drafted the letter. Both my parents signed it. I paid the $5,541 in arrears directly to the lender. I set up the automatic transfer for $1,847 on the 1st of every month. I saved every confirmation, every statement, every transfer record in a folder on my computer labeled Mercer House Payments and backed it up in 2 places. I did not tell Derek. I did not bring it up at family dinners or at Christmas or at my mother's birthday in March, when she opened gifts in the living room of the house that my transfers were keeping. I did not post about it. I did not mention it to my cousin Janelle, who I was close with, or to my Aunt Deborah, who I liked. I kept it the way I kept most things in that family, quietly, efficiently, without requiring acknowledgement. And life continued in the way it had always continued. Derek got a promotion at his logistics company, and my parents took him and his wife, Stacy, to a steakhouse to celebrate. I got promoted to senior manager, and my mother said, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," and moved on to asking whether I was seeing anyone. Derek and Stacy bought a house in Rancho Cucamonga, and my parents helped them move for a weekend, which I heard about through a group text that had been started without me and then apparently accidentally expanded to include me when Janelle replied to the wrong thread. I helped Derek move a couch over the phone by describing, based on his measurements, exactly how to angle it through the stairwell. He thanked me. My mother texted him a photo of the living room with a couch in it and the caption, "Looks like home already." I kept making the transfers. In the spring of my 2nd year of payments, my father's knee required a second surgery, a more involved one this time, and he was off work for 6 weeks. My mother called me, tense in the specific way that meant money, and I talked her through the short-term disability paperwork and found the supplemental coverage rider in their insurance policy that she hadn't known was there. It paid 60% of his income during the recovery. She thanked me in a way that was genuine and warm, and that lasted about 4 days before things returned to their normal temperature. I am telling you all of this not to build a case for what I eventually decided, but because I want you to understand that what looked, from the outside, like a family that took me for granted, that was accurate, but it was also more complicated than that. My mother was not a calculating person. She was a person who had organized her emotional world around Derek for so long that the organizing had become structural, invisible to her, the way a house settles into its foundation. She didn't exclude me because she had weighed the options and chosen him. She excluded me because including me, really including me, would have required her to see the foundation, and nobody is comfortable looking at that. That is not an excuse. But it is a reason, and the reason mattered to me because without it I would not have been as patient as I was, and I would not have been as deliberate as I was when the Tuesday came. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I told you, was when my Aunt Deborah accidentally forwarded me my mother's text. What I haven't told you yet is what the 3 weeks before that looked like. In early November, I had made the usual transfer. The confirmation came through on the 2nd as it always did. I filed it. That same week, I had a work trip to Sacramento for an audit that ran 4 days, and when I came back I had 47 unread messages in the family group text, a thread I was technically part of, though my participation in it had been limited over the years to occasional replies that generated little response. I scrolled through. The thread was about Thanksgiving. Derek and Stacy were coming. Janelle was bringing her boyfriend, the new one, the one nobody had met yet. My Uncle Pete was doing the turkey again. There was discussion of arrival times, of who was bringing which dish, of whether the leaf for the dining table was still in the garage or had been moved to storage. My name did not appear in any of it. That was not, by itself, unusual. My name often didn't appear in threads that were nominally for everyone. What was different this time was that I had been in Sacramento during the planning, so I hadn't even been ambient. I hadn't declined or accepted or failed to respond. I simply had not been considered. There had been no message to me saying, "Hey, are you coming?" There had been no assumption in either direction. I had been absent from the planning the way a piece of furniture is absent from a conversation about redecorating, not rejected, exactly, just not part of the frame. I sent my mother a separate text on a Thursday. "Hey Mom, am I coming for Thanksgiving? Haven't heard anything." She replied 4 hours later, "Of course, we'll talk soon." She did not follow up. I did not follow up either, because I had learned a long time ago that pressing my mother on logistics produced either vagueness or a sharpness that wasn't worth the exchange. Then came the Tuesday. Then came Deborah's accidental forward. After I sent my mother the forward text, I saw it. "Mom." I sat with my phone in my desk drawer for 2 hours and finished my work. My mother did not reply. At noon I retrieved my phone and checked. No message. I ate lunch at my desk. At 2:15, she called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that began with "Rachel, I can explain," and then spent 40 seconds explaining nothing, only asking me to call her back when I had a chance, her voice carrying the particular register she used when she had done something she knew was wrong but was not yet ready to say so directly. I did not call back that day. What I did, that evening, was open Marcus Webb's contact in my phone and send him a text. "Hey Marcus, quick question when you have a moment. Thinking about whether I want to modify or pause a recurring personal arrangement. Want to understand my options." He called me back in 20 minutes. We talked for 45. By the end of the conversation, I understood precisely what I could do, what it would affect, what the timeline would look like, and what documentation I already had in place. I thanked him. I made a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about it for a long time. I want to be honest about what I was thinking, because I don't want you to believe this was a decision I made quickly or lightly. What I was sitting with was not anger exactly, or not only that. It was something closer to clarity. For 47 months, I had been holding something up. I had done it without fanfare, without conditions, without the kind of accounting that turns generosity into a ledger. And what I had received in return that Tuesday was not ingratitude. Ingratitude would have been something, would have acknowledged the thing being given. What I had received was erasure. My mother had not thought of me as someone whose presence at Thanksgiving required managing. She had thought of me as someone whose absence required no explanation to the rest of the family, only the instruction not to mention the dinner if I happened to call. That is a different kind of thing. I was not going to call her back that night and have the conversation she was expecting, the one where I either erupted, which would confirm everything she thought she knew about the drama, or where I absorbed it, which was what I had always done, which was the behavior that had made the text possible in the first place. I was going to do something I had never done in 31 years of being a member of that family. I was going to stop. Wednesday passed. My mother called twice. I texted back, I need a couple of days. I'll reach out soon. She replied, Rachel, please. I put my phone down. Thursday morning I called Marcus and told him what I wanted to do. He asked me twice if I was certain. I told him I was. He told me to give it 24 hours and call him back if I still felt the same way. I said I would. I already knew I would. Friday morning I called him back. We confirmed the terms. Under the loan agreement my parents had signed, the notarized letter drafted in Marcus's office 4 years prior, the payments were structured as a personal loan, not a gift. Marcus had included, at his insistence at the time, a standard clause allowing for suspension of payments upon 30 days written notice. I had not thought much about that clause when I signed the letter. I had agreed to it because Marcus said it was standard protective language, and because I trusted his judgment, and because at 27 I had not imagined a version of the future where I would need it. The 30-day notice requirement meant I could not simply stop the transfer and have it take effect immediately. What I could do, and what I did, that Friday morning, while my mother's Thanksgiving dinner was presumably being prepared 2 hours south of me, was send the written notice by certified mail and simultaneously place a hold on the next scheduled transfer, pending confirmation of receipt. The transfer that had been scheduled to go out the following Monday did not process. I did not call anyone to tell them. I did not send a message to the family thread. I drove to the farmer's market near my apartment, bought a bunch of persimmons and a loaf of sourdough, came home, and made lunch. My mother called at 11:47 that Friday morning. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 2:15. I let that one go too. At 4:33 my phone showed a call from a number I didn't recognize, with a 909 area code. I didn't answer. The voicemail, when I listened to it that evening, was from a man named Kevin at Westfield Mortgage Services, the loan servicer, calling to confirm receipt of a payment that appeared to have been scheduled but had not processed, and asking whether the account holder, my parents, would like to arrange an alternative payment method or discuss options. He left a callback number and said to reach out before close of business the following Monday to avoid a late processing notation on the account. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Not with satisfaction, exactly. More with the steady, quiet recognition of someone who has been carrying a weight for a long time and has finally set it on the ground, and is simply observing what happens now that it is no longer in the air. Saturday morning my mother called 4 times before 10 o'clock. At 10:17, Derek called. I did not answer. At 11:02, my Aunt Deborah called, Deborah, who had started all of this with a forwarded text, and I answered that one because Deborah had always been the person in my family most capable of a straight conversation. Rachel, she said. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. Are you having a good Thanksgiving weekend? She was quiet for a second. Your mother is upset. She says something happened with the house payment. Did she tell you why she thinks something happened? Another pause. She mentioned that you'd seen the text. The one Rachel, I am so sorry about that. I genuinely hit the wrong button. I know you did, I said. That's not what this is about. What is it about then? I thought about how to say it simply. I've been making my parents' mortgage payment for almost 4 years, I said. I'm going to stop. I gave the proper notice. I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm doing it because the arrangement no longer makes sense for me. The silence on the other end of that call was the longest one I had heard from Deborah in my life. When she spoke again, her voice was careful.
For years, she said.
47 months. Rachel, does Derek know?
No.
She exhaled slowly. Your mother didn't tell anyone? No, I said. I didn't tell anyone either. I wasn't doing it for credit. I could hear Deborah processing this, the specific kind of recalibration that happens when a story you thought you understood turns out to have a load-bearing wall you didn't know was there. What do you need right now? She said finally. Nothing, I said. I just wanted you to know I'm all right. Thank you for asking. We got off the phone. I poured a second cup of coffee and went back to the book I had been reading. Monday arrived. The transfer did not process. I had confirmed that with Marcus on Friday. At 9:14 that morning my phone rang. It was my father. I answered. My father was not a man who called unless something had moved him past the threshold of things he could manage internally. He was quieter than my mother, less expressive, and his relationship with me had always been cordial in the way that a room can be cordial, not cold, exactly, but not warm enough to linger in. When he called me, it was usually about something practical.
A form he didn't understand.
A question about a number. He trusted my judgment in a way he never quite articulated but had demonstrated consistently over the years. "Rachel," he said, "your mom called the mortgage company this morning. They said there's a missed payment."
"Yes," I said.
He was quiet for a moment. "Did something happen? With your account?" "No," I said. "Nothing happened with my account." Another pause. My father processing. I could hear the kitchen sounds behind him, the particular creak of the chair by the window, which I had known my whole life. "Did you stop it?" he said. "I gave notice on Friday," I said. Marcus Webb drafted the letter. "It went out certified mail. You should receive it this week." Marcus Webb, he said. He knew the name. I had mentioned Marcus when we set up the original agreement, had referred to him as my attorney. My father had a good memory for names. This is about the letter we signed." "Yes. Rachel."
He stopped. He started again.
"Your mother didn't," he stopped again.
"Dad,"
I said. "I'm not angry. I want you to understand that. I thought about this for several days, and it isn't something I did in a moment. I need to step back from the arrangement. You and Mom are going to need to contact the lender and work out a plan. Marcus can recommend someone who does mortgage restructuring if you want a name." "How long have you been?" He seemed to lose the end of the sentence. "The payments. How long?" "Since I was 27, I said. The silence after that was different from the silences that had come before. It had a different quality, the particular quality of a room where something large has shifted and the walls haven't quite settled yet. "I didn't know that," my father said. His voice was low. "I know," I said. "Your mother told me it was, she said she'd worked it out, that she had a plan." I didn't ask specifics. I should have. "You didn't know?" I said. "No," he said. "I didn't." There was another long pause. My father's breathing was the only sound on the line. "I'll look at the letter when it comes," he said. "Okay," I said. "Rachel." A third stop. Then, "I'm glad you answered." "I'm glad you called, Dad." We ended the call. I sat at my desk for 5 minutes without doing anything. Then I opened my email and wrote to Marcus asking him to prepare the referral information for the mortgage restructuring specialist, because I had told my father I would have it, and I keep the things I say I will do. My mother called that afternoon. I answered. She began the way I expected. "Rachel, I think there's been a misunderstanding," and I let her speak for about 45 seconds, which was roughly the time it took her to reach the part where the word drama appeared, specifically in the phrase, "I just didn't want any drama at the table this year." When she reached that word, I said, very quietly, "Mom, I know what the text said. I read it. This conversation doesn't need to be about the text." She stopped. "Then what is it about?" "The mortgage arrangement," I said. "Dad and I spoke this morning. He's going to review the letter when it arrives. I want you to know that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I need to make a different choice about how I'm spending my resources, and this is the honest version of that conversation." "You're stopping the payments," she said. "Yes." Her voice, when she spoke again, was not the voice she used for most things. It was smaller, stripped of the management layer she usually kept in place. "Rachel."
"We can't," she stopped.
"The payment is almost $2,000. "I know what the payment is," I said. "I've been making it for 4 years." The sound she made was not a word. It was a breath, sharp and then very still. "I didn't know you'd been," she stopped again. "Gerald told you he spoke to me?" "Dad called me this morning," I said. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different in a second way, a way I had not heard before from her, and which I recognized, in my mother's particular emotional vocabulary, as the closest she was likely to come to something resembling accountability. "Why didn't you tell me you were the one doing it?" "Because you didn't ask," I said. "And because I didn't need you to know. At the time." "At the time," she repeated. "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do we do now?" "Contact the lender," I said. "Explain the situation. They have forbearance programs. I've also asked Marcus to send me a referral for a mortgage restructuring specialist." I'll forward that to you when I have it.
She stopped.
You already did that. I said I would. I said. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I did not fill the silence. I had spent 31 years filling silences in that family, and I was learning, slowly, that some of them were better left as they were. Rachel, my mother said. I'm sorry about the text.
I know you are, I said.
Thank you for saying it. We ended the call shortly after that. It was not a resolution, it was not even the beginning of one, but it was the most direct conversation my mother and I had ever had about something real, and I noted that fact without attaching too much weight to it. The week that followed was the week I think of now when I think about what it looks like when a pattern disrupts itself. Derek called on Tuesday. He had spoken to my parents by then. I didn't know exactly what they had told him, but enough because he opened with I didn't know about any of this in a tone that was genuinely disoriented rather than strategic. We talked for 20 minutes. It was not a difficult conversation. Derek was not a bad person. He was a person who had benefited from a structure he hadn't examined, which is a different thing, and he was, in that conversation, at least trying to examine it. He said twice that he felt like an idiot. I told him that wasn't useful to me and asked him to focus instead on what the family needed to do practically. He said he'd call the lender with my parents. I said that sounded right. He also asked if I was coming to Christmas. I told him I didn't know yet. My parents contacted Westfield Mortgage Services on Wednesday. The representative they spoke with, I learned this later from my father, who called me with an update in the careful, deliberate way he had started calling me, told them that their account would enter a 30-day grace period before a late notation appeared, and that they would need to provide documentation of their income situation to qualify for a forbearance arrangement. The representative's name was Gina Torrance, and she was, by my father's account, efficient and kind. He told me this as if he thought I would want to know.
I did want to know.
The forbearance arrangement they qualified for was not a solution. It was a pause, 90 days, during which the missed payment would be deferred to the end of the loan. They would still need to either resume making the payment themselves or sell the house. My father, in the same phone call, told me they had started talking about the latter. The house was worth more than they had paid for it. Enough, after the remaining loan balance of $198,000 was settled, that they could clear a modest sum and move to something smaller, something they could actually afford on their own. He said the word smaller without inflection, which was how my father said most things, but I heard the years behind it. I told him I thought that was a reasonable plan. I meant it. I forwarded the referral from Marcus, a mortgage restructuring specialist named Elena Ruiz who had excellent reviews and a patient communication style which I thought would matter for my mother, and I sent it to both my parents by email, which was a format that felt right for information rather than conversation. The months after that were not a reconciliation in the way you see in movies, where something breaks open and then heals cleanly, and everyone sits together at a table and the light is good. What happened was slower and less linear than that, and I think more real. My mother and I talked on the phone every 2 or 3 weeks. The conversations were shorter than they used to be, but they were more honest, which made them feel longer in the way that honest things sometimes do. She did not pretend the text hadn't happened. I did not pretend the payment hadn't been real. We were two people learning, at 31 and 58 respectively, how to speak to each other, without one of us managing the other. My Aunt Deborah came to visit me in Pasadena in January, just her, without it being coordinated through anyone else. She brought wine and a bag of clementines, and we sat in my kitchen for 3 hours and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of it, and also some things that did. She told me that my mother had told the rest of the family, after everything, what I had been doing, that the payment had been mine, that it had been mine for 4 years. Deborah said the room had gone very quiet when my mother said it. I asked what Derek's reaction had been. Deborah said he had pushed back his chair, put his elbows on the table, and looked at his hands.
I didn't need more detail than that.
My parents listed the house in February. It sold in 3 weeks for $387,000. After the remaining balance on the loan, which by then was $194,800, slightly reduced from where it had stood when I stopped, and after closing costs and agent fees, they netted approximately $168,000. They put a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex 20 minutes from where Derek and Stacy lived. It was smaller. It was manageable. My father told me, when he called to give me the news of the closing, that it felt like something had been resolved, which was the most philosophical thing I had ever heard him say. Asked if they were okay. He said they were getting there. I told him I was glad. I did not attend the closing. I was not asked, which was fine. I did send my mother a text when the sale went through. Congratulations on the closing. I hope the new place feels like home soon. She replied with a heart emoji, which was, for my mother, the equivalent of a paragraph. As for me, as for the 31-year-old woman who had sat at her kitchen table the Tuesday before Thanksgiving and read a text that was never meant for her eyes, and who had felt the things she felt and then chosen, deliberately, what to do with it, I was all right. I was more than all right. I had a job I was good at, an apartment I had filled with things I had chosen, a friendship with Marcus Webb that had proven itself useful in ways neither of us had expected, and a relationship with my Aunt Deborah that had grown into something I hadn't known I was missing. I went home for Easter. Derek made ribs. Stacy brought a cake. Janelle's boyfriend, his name was Anthony, and he had a dry, quiet sense of humor that I found immediately likable, helped me find the good plates in the cabinet of my parents' new apartment, where I had never been before and where nothing was yet where you would expect it. We ate around the kitchen table, which was the same table from the old house, the one with the small burn mark near the corner from a candle incident in 1999 that nobody had ever adequately explained. My mother sat across from me. At one point during the meal, she passed me the bread without being asked, before I had reached for it, which was the kind of small and unremarkable act that in that family, in that moment, meant something. I took it. I said thank you. We kept eating. There is a thing I have come to understand about holding people accountable that I want to leave you with because it is the thing that is true and that I had to learn by living it rather than by being told. Accountability is not punishment. It is not withholding for the sake of pain. It is the act of allowing the natural weight of a situation to rest where it actually belongs, instead of absorbing it yourself, because the alternative feels disruptive. For a long time I had believed that carrying the weight quietly was generosity. It was in part. But it was also, in part, a way of protecting everyone around me from a reckoning that would have required them to see me clearly. When I stopped carrying it, they had to. And we were all, slowly, imperfectly, in the particular way that real families manage these things, better for it. Not every quiet act deserves to be invisible forever. And not every withdrawal is cruelty. That Tuesday, reading my mother's text in the 7:40 morning light, I understood something that I am still learning to apply, that you cannot make people see you by carrying more. You can only set down what you are carrying, stand where you are, and let the weight speak for itself. So here is what I want to ask you, and I want you to think about it specifically. When my father called me that Monday morning, when he heard me say the word 47 and went quiet, that was the moment everything in that house began to shift. Not the text. Not the missed payment. Not the call from the lender. The moment my father heard the number and understood, for the first time, what had been happening in his own house without his knowledge. If you had been on that call, if you had heard that silence, what would you have said? Would you have said anything at all? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There is a new one every week, and the community that is built up in these comments is one I'm genuinely glad exists. I'll see you in the next one.